Hello everyone, this is Greyshot17, and today I'm going to be going over Company of Heroes 3, doing a review of it and also a post-launch review, simply because of the fact that I didn't want to do this initially because A, there was a lot of promotional stuff, so I felt kind of like I would be biased if I'm getting money for promoting and selling this game, right? It doesn't really make sense for me to do an honest review on it if it feels like there is a monetary bias to that, but most of the promotions have passed. So, and also the fact I worked on it with the code development stuff. So all this is how I was able to put in my opinion years in advance on this game and kind of voice, hey, maybe you should focus on this rather than that. Did they always listen to me? No. And again, they took opinion from all content creators, but I at least want to give my honest thoughts, especially right now, and hopefully look back on this video and see how Code 3 has changed or maybe not changed. We'll see. But my goal is to give my thoughts on where it is at now and where I would like to see it in the future. So campaign, let's start off with that, because you have two campaigns. The Italian campaign, which is the British and Americans having like an inter-service rivalry in a new turn-based layer where they battle their way through German defenses to get through all sorts of defensive lines and liberate Italy. Then you have the Africa Corps missions, which are centered in North Africa in early to mid 1942 as they push their way to El Alamein. Now, I've already seen some people put up their thoughts on it, and for me, I actually think that the turn-based stuff and the tactical pause and also gameplay changes that they did for Elevation have all been good. The unit riding system, so riflemen can ride on tanks, solid. The breach system is a canned animation, so people are able to anticipate that stuff in multiplayer, but in single player, actually, again, I think it's a solid approach. Tactical pause helps new players come in, solid stuff. I feel like all the new stuff they've added here is way better than the stuff in Code 2. Because even though I like the mud in the winter and blizzard system, you'll find very few people that actually agree with me on that. Most people, especially competitive people in Company of Heroes 2, hated that system and wanted it removed, which is why if you play Company of Heroes 2 now, all the innovative gameplay stuff, for the most part, except for the Fog of War system, where it's more based on units, and if something's blocking, you can't see around it. Most of the stuff is not in Company of Heroes 2 multiplayer, right? They removed all of it because people hated it so much. Here, again, I think all the stuff here for the terrain and elevation stuff, I think is positive, and all that is really good. Tactical pause helps new players, and I feel like that's where the Italian campaign really shines, is having an intro kind of to Company of Heroes, especially for newer players. The difficulty, I think, does need to be upped for more experienced players, but I think the mission variety, that is from Anzio to kind of the missions where you're saving people or you're trying to push down a hill with Italian partisans, all that stuff I really like. My favorite, again, is the Anzio mission with the Germans using railway to just blast your infantry. And the fact you have companies that you upgrade and can change. You can throw in a veteran division, or, company, or a inexperienced company into a mission, and there's a very big gameplay difference between them. So for people saying that the missions are exactly the same for companies, I highly disagree. Depending on which company you pick, from the armored to the airborne to the British to the Americans, it is very different. Now, what people rightfully say that is an issue is overall the difficulty for the German defenses or German companies kind of counterattacking you, and also how easy it is to heal. I do think the difficulty should be upped, and I understand why they didn't do this initially, because they wanted new players to not feel so overburdened by all these different systems. But if you're going to increase the difficulty, you should, again, have factors like Frostpunk. Frostpunk, in normal difficulty, everyone lives. In the hard difficulty, yeah, there's going to be hundreds of people starving to death, but good luck. This should have had a system where the healing system maybe doesn't apply. You can only apply it once for a company every few days, where the companies will attack cities that you've liberated. That stuff should be implemented, and they've already done some hot fixes on that, and they already stated they're going to be doing more in the future. But I do like the foundation for the Italian campaign, even though it doesn't have the most intricate story like Code 1 and Code 2, so that's kind of left for the North African campaign. I think it's a step in the right direction, because I could easily see this sort of style being moved over to the Pacific, to the Battle of Berlin, all these different areas that would be great, awesome expansions for this game or something like that. Now, do I think that's going to be an expansion? Probably not, but I think it would be a good idea, right? The Battle of France, you could easily do a system where you're having German forces push their way through against the French. The type of turn-based style that they have here, I cannot wait. Korea could be awesome with this system. And again, if they just change the difficulty and make a few alterations, I think this campaign is going to be a lot better. The North African campaign is more personal, and you play as a commander under Rommel. That said, even though I like the mission variety, and overall it is a good length, I think it's about 6-7 hours depending on the difficulty. And that one, the difficulty does matter because the British defenses and other stuff, so it changes, but they're like mission 3, pushing through all those British defenses is brutal. There's a lot of like defenses and everything at work, so you have to be very good with mine layers, artillery, armored thrusts, airstrikes, everything just to get through it. And that's just mission 3. So I feel like there's a good set of difficulty and stuff there. The lacking part is actually the story and presentation. I think overall it's a great idea to show the people of North Africa, because I feel like that's a story that's not touched on, kind of similar to kind of featuring Italy. I feel like most people think of D-Day and maybe the Soviets for like battles in Europe, but not really Italy. So I think them focusing on that is actually a pretty good idea. Next to Japan, that would have been number 1. But on the flip side, I think North Africa showing it from the civilian perspective, especially as Rommel advances, great. The problem is, while you play as the German forces pushing through and the Italians, as, you know, call-in units, because it's mostly the Africa Corps, and also that you are hearing like stories and seeing a story about civilians living in Benghazi at the time and trying to do partisan warfare. It doesn't necessarily impact the gameplay. The gameplay doesn't really bring into it. Now, there is a little bit of cross where they talk about getting intel from the Germans or trying to steal it, and then that helps them defeat Rommel. But I feel like there should have been at least one mission where it should have been directly aimed at dealing with the partisans as Rommel, and one mission where, as the game ends, it's a stalemate in the first battle of El Alamein. Should have probably had a second battle of the second battle of El Alamein, where it kind of closes out, where Rommel is defeated. He tries all these different ways to win. He can't. He has to pull back, and unlike the first mission where you save the Italians coming in, you leave the Italians and you hightail it out of there. And I feel like especially that would have brought down the image of the Desert Fox, where it's kind of boasted throughout the entire campaign. And then the final mission, you break it, and it would have went down. So I think a partisan mission and that mission would have probably pushed it to easily my favorite single-player direct campaign for Company of Heroes under that guise. But because of the presentation issues, because again, the art and animation aren't really nailing it, I feel like they're trying to push it to do more than really what it can. Unlike Starship Troopers or Frostpunk, where it had more still images without sort of movement, here they try it, but I don't think it really works. And I understand why they didn't do 3D cutscenes, because while Code 1 and Code 2 has some cinematic stuff, especially Code 2 has a lot of meme-worthy faces and reactions, so I get why they didn't want to try to repeat that again. But right now, I think Company of Heroes 2, The Ardennes Assault, is the best campaign. But I do think Company of Heroes 3 has a lot of positive stuff, like the save system, the turn-based stuff, tactical pauses. I feel like there's a lot of good variety, especially in units. Unfortunately, they don't have the Panther.
For example, the focus of the campaigns being earlier in the war leaves some tanks out entirely, like the ubiquitous Panther and the infamous King Tiger.
But at least that's my thoughts on the campaign from someone who played through both at least a few times. So, hey, let me know what you think on that. But next up on performance, I think performance is solid. I had no issues with the performance except for doing replays or going into dev mode or pulling up some mods. That's the only time where I've had, I think, 1 or 2 bug splats. Beyond that, playing the normal campaign or multiplayer, I've not had crashes, bug splats, or anything like that. I did have a situation where I let the game running for like 12 hours and came back to it, and then the game started having, I did a multiplayer mission and it slowed down. That is the only time that I had an issue with this. And again, I feel like that's my own thing for keeping it running for that long, just in the menu. But hey, overall, the performance has been a solid 2K60, which if I remove the cap, it probably would average out around 75 to 90 from my tests. But again, that's me. I know every computer's different, but overall, I had a way better, solid experience in performance with this game than I did with Company of Heroes 2, which to this day, if you play on 4v4 on certain maps, chugs. Here, I don't really have that aspect or that issue. But again, that's just my own PC. It could be very different for you, and I know every PC is different. The visual style, I know this has been hampered on, but I've seen a lot less of it now. I think it's fine. I've already gone to this multiple times, but again, I think the biggest thing from the alpha they did a few months ago was make sure the performance was rock solid, and the technical issues about like shadows and everything like that were fixed. And I think it looks a lot better now than it has done in the past. And again, I think it looks fine. Sound quality, just to touch on that real quick, I think is fine. I don't think it's as great as Code 2 in certain aspects, but also it doesn't have a lot of hindrances that Code 2 had. It's just the tinnitus-inducing gunshot and other sound issues that I had with Code 2. The concussion sound in Code 3, I think, kind of works, but I do think maybe it's just not my type of thing. Overall, I think it's fine, like I said, but I just don't think it hits some heights of other games, nor is it as terrible as other people may say it to be. Now, moving on to multiplayer, again, I like all 4 factions. They all 4 are unique. Sure, they have balance issues like the AT boys or emplacement spam for the Wehrmacht or other things, but overall, I think they're all solid. And I actually do like how for the Africa Corps, the best units are the Italians. That's just funny to me. But even though they have a lot of units, a good amount of diversity, the factions aren't my biggest issues. Right now, it's kind of the layer behind that. Right now, the biggest issues I have is the lack of multiplayer maps. This is probably going to be the biggest issue for a lot of people. For 1v1, 2v2, it's relatively fine. There's 5 1v1 maps and 4 2v2 maps. But then there's only 3 3v3 maps and 2 4v4 maps. This is probably the biggest strain on the overall community, is the lack of maps. Right now, the maps themselves are fine. Winterline, especially for 4v4, is good, but the focus on fuel in the stars in the south kind of make that the priority, and kind of makes the game a little bit less fun. And then the Maginot Gap is a bigger, wide open map with a diverse set of locations to fight, which is better, but it's not as balanced or as probably solid as Red Ball or White Ball. And even though there's probably like 8 to 10 multiplayer maps in Code 2 that I love or I really enjoy playing in, here there's only 2 for 4v4. And being the biggest set for the community to play in, it definitely has an impact on people's interest in 4v4, a little less 3v3 because there's at least 3 maps, but it is having an impact, which I think if they want to make sure those crowds are appeased, adding more of the community maps from mods and other things like that is probably the step in the right direction. Because right now, even though people are saying that their lack of features, the lack of maps is probably the biggest thing that holds Company of Heroes 3 back right now in the multiplayer aspect. Now, there's also a bunch of other things. There's assets that were definitely used in Code 2 that are not meant for Code 3 that are visually present. There's no surrender button. There's still some UI and some other bugs that are featured in. There's definitely bugs where people play as, let's say, the doc, but they spawn in as the Wehrmacht, but they still have the doc's battle group and they can't have access to any of that. There's obviously some bugs in the multiplayer, and that's not even talking about the color system, about how people are supposed to differentiate themselves between themselves, their team, and also know who's who, because there's no identifier for their username on any of the units. So I don't know who that person is or whose color that is. It makes it a lot harder to figure that stuff out. Now, that might be finalized with the replay system in the future, which they haven't put a tentative date on when that's coming. But again, it is unfortunate that the replay system is not done or available. That said, I understand they want to make sure it's not like Code 2's, where Code 2, it had a replay system at launch, but would cause severe crashing or other issues upon playing it, where it could slow down your game or cause issues. But again, for the multiplayer aspect, for me playing this consistently, updating the maps is probably the biggest thing, more so than balance. I know it's going to take years to balance, and Code 2 still has a balance that's preferred toward artillery, still the Katyushas, LFHs, stuff like that. That's a given. But 3v3 and 4v4. I know it's different in 1v1, 2v2. I'm not here for that. I don't have fun just trying to be try hard, trying to gain up the leaderboards as much. That's not the type of person I like to play, or that's not the type of person I am, right? So I hope that they kind of adapt to the 3v3 and 4v4 crowd and have that stuff. As a content creator, I hope they have replays soon, but again, I would rather have the maps there and then replays, right? I think that's a top priority for Company of Heroes, with some slight balance tweaks, but maps are probably the biggest thing right now. That's the biggest red flag I have to fix Company of Heroes. But overall, I still think if you're new to RTSs or anything like that, I think the campaign is solid enough, especially with all the missions and variety, that it is something I would recommend. Now, for a diehard, if I had to give a rating, for a diehard Company of Heroes fan, I'd probably give this a 7. If anyone's saying this is the worst Company of Heroes, property, they have never seen the movie, or they have not played through the rough patches of Code 2. And if those who are saying this is the best, a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10 game, they are blowing smoke up your ass. Hopefully, this isn't a situation like Halo Infinite, where it kind of had that same base where the foundation's there, they just need to fix stuff, and then we're a year and a half later, and a lot of that stuff is still not there, right? It's still not done. Hopefully, the team at Relic realizes the situation they're in and make sure that the community is appeased and has all the stuff they need. So far, they've made videos and definitely updates and hotfixes already to fix all the stuff that were the biggest issues, such as UI not saving. They immediately fixed that a day after release. So if they keep up that consistency, Company of Heroes 3 feature looks bright. If they wait 6 months before they update a single 3v3 or 4v4 map, we are in trouble. But that's where I am right now. Thank you guys for watching. This has been Greyshot117, and I'll see you all next time. Hello, everyone. This is Greyshot117, and before y'all go, let me give a special shout out to Patreon supporters Joey G240, Milam, Big Cooch, Aphyria, Ace, Pyro Shark, Tony B95, Epic Pleb. Thank you all for your incredible support and helping me grow my channel and support my channel and everything I do. Thank you, and to the rest of you, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.